Good afternoon. I'm truly honored to be here, especially on a day like today. I was kind of guessing how many people are going to be there to come and listen to us speak about treaty, but I'm glad to see you all. It's still a beautiful day, regardless of what happens, what kind of weather we have. First of all, I want to give thanks for the gift of tobacco that I've received before the start of this session. Tobacco is offered usually when we're seeking advice, spiritual knowledge, education, or whatever, and we ask our elders. Tobacco is usually passed, and the reason for that is because tobacco is a spiritual plant, one of the first plants that came into being after the creation of the world, Turtle Island as we know it. And the Creator, one of the teachings that he gave to the indigenous peoples or to the First Nation people, if you're going to be speaking to me, then you will offer tobacco. The smoke from that tobacco will come to where I am, where I will be looking after you. And by the same token, our elders have said that if you're going to be asking me for some knowledge, asking me for a song, asking me for anything, then offer tobacco. So, and that's why I say thank you for the tobacco this morning or this afternoon. We are very spiritual people, contrary to what First Contact thought, contrary to the doctrine of discovery. And as First Nations people, we totally believed in a higher power, a power that was much greater than us as human beings, a power where we got everything that we needed to survive sustainability. So with that, in my own humble way, I want to introduce myself with my spirit name. Now come and go in Anishinabae. The Tibidezi being don't say, Makwando them. Apiji kendam nongum pangiji bed the bajimuan. Kedin minike go gabi ashta in the maguan, where the gabi on Chian. Miigwech. And it's also important that we introduce ourselves, begin our presentations with our own traditional spiritual name. In the First Nations territories, by presenting your spirit name, you acknowledge the relationship. We say, as I've said, I'm a Bear Clan member, and there could be some Bear Clan in the audience, and we're related. And my father always told me, he said, you're a Bear Clan, and you have family all over. You'd never be afraid, because there will always be someone to look after you. And I didn't understand that. I said, Dad, my relatives are in Rolling River, and that's where they are. And that's where I come from. And I didn't understand that until I came into ceremony. And people started to talk about their clans and their relatives. And then it became very clear for me. And I'm really honored that I have family. Every ceremony that I go, I meet family. And quite often end up hugs and sharing some tea or bannock or or some kind of food, and that's what family members do. And knowledge, that's important for us. So with my acknowledgement of who I am and where I come from, my clan, our spirituality is still coming back to life, revival, and our spirituality in our communities were under pressure for several hundred years. At the time of first contact, it was believed that we did not have a creator. Just because we didn't have a church over there, the newcomers thought that we were not religious. We didn't have a religion. But that's not the case. Maybe there was a religion overseas, but over here, we had a way of life which acknowledged creation, a way of life that acknowledged a higher power. So those are some of the very peripheral differences between our cultures. There was a cultural clash, of course, when the first contact was made, and it's created many difficulties through our journey in terms of coming together. But we've been able. We're working through that today, and of course the Treaty Commission that was established is one of the efforts that's being made by Canada, by First Nations, to bring up about a greater understanding of the parties, which includes, of course, the Government of Canada, and they are your representatives in some cases, our representatives. We went to the members of Parliament in the city of Winnipeg when we started talking about the Treaty Commission. We went to our leadership, the chiefs in this province. There's 63 chiefs in Manitoba. And we requested for their support to go in this direction. And by all means, we received the authority that we were looking for to go ahead and work in this direction. And it's been great. There's been some bumps on the road, but otherwise they were okay. And as you have heard, I was the first treaty commissioner, and I want to share one interesting phone call that I received probably in the first year of the establishment of the commission. It was a settler from a farmer from east of Port-au-Prairie. And he said that, I don't know what this Treaty Commission is all about. I thought that we had everything settled with the land. I pay my taxes, I own my own land, and I provide everything that I need for myself. And you as First Nations, on the other hand, you have maybe a little piece of property that you call a reserve. And in many cases, that reserve does not have the life that's required for you to survive. And he went on and on and on. And we were on the phone for almost 2 hours. He phoned me about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and 5 o'clock we were still there. And he did all the talking. And he wanted to be able to start his own nation. He says, well, I'm a nation too then, if that's how you define nationhood. And he said, I have my family, I have my relatives, my neighbors, we can be the nation. And I said, that's fine, if that's the way you feel. But you'll still, as a nation, you'll still have to deal with Canada. You'll still have to deal with the municipalities, the town councils. And he got angry at me. And because of that anger, he started to yell on the phone. And I was taught, part of my culture is to step back and listen and be respectful. So which is what I did. I just sat back in my office and I listened to everything that he had to say, and then I was writing down, taking some of the notes in case my bosses ever came back to me. And in the end, I guess he noticed I wasn't responding to anything he was saying. So I said, finally he stopped. What do you have to say about that? I said, you know what? I said, as a child, I learned very early from my mother to listen and to be respectful. And that's what I've been doing to you. I'm listening to you. I'm respectful not to speak when you're talking. I assume that I will have time to respond to your questions. And that was it. He gave me my time to speak after that. And I think in the end that we had a good discussion. It turned out to be a good discussion. It wasn't it wasn't anger anymore. And I think that's one of the things that the Treaty Commission has done. It's stabilized somewhat the feelings of the communities in terms of our understanding of land. And it's built a relationship throughout this province that we can at least talk. We can at least discuss. And even today, the Prime Minister of Canada is talking about one economy. And he's talking with First Nations people, respecting the ownership of the resource. And I want to go back to, in terms of the land, when we went to make a treaty with the Crown, there was treaties that were being made in the eastern part of our territory. And throughout, and Canada soon realized that through royal order, through the Crown of Great Britain, Queen Victoria, directed her colonies that before you move on to First Nation land, Indian land is what she said, you make sure that you have their consent. Before you begin to harvest their resources, you make sure that you have the right to do so. And you will compensate the Indians for what you take. And you will also begin with a treaty making process. You will treat with them. And you will treat them as brethren, is what the books say. Brothers, family. So they use that. They use that to gain the First Nations or the Indian support towards treaty making process. Yeah, and very quickly the treaty started to move west. There was a number of factors why that was happening. Was they wanted to create a country from sea to sea and to sea. And the U.S. was moving northward. They wanted to expand their territory as well. So those were the reasons why the treaty-making process was important. But they also wanted to bring more settlers into the area. They wanted a railroad across the territory. And Treaty 1 was one of the first areas that signed on to treaty. There was, I believe, 7 First Nations that signed on to Treaty number 1, which is all in this particular region that we are at. And then Treaty 2, 3 back in Ontario, and a portion of Manitoba. Treaty 4 in the southwestern part of Manitoba. And Treaty 5, almost all of the northern Manitoba. And we had adhesions with 6 and with 10. So those are all the treaty areas that we have here in Manitoba, within 5 linguistic groups of people. And one of the misunderstandings that is out there, and I recently acknowledged this, that we have basically 5 nations of people, of indigenous people, of native people. I'm getting confused. I don't even know what to call myself anymore. First Nations. But the government does that. That's the government terminology. At one point in time, at contact, we were Indians. They thought they were in India. That's what they were looking for, a trade route. I believe it was for tea. The British are tea drinkers. And they wanted tea, so they were looking for that trade route. And they ended up on Turtle Island. And they thought there was people, brown-skinned people, and they thought that they had struck gold and had found this short trade route. But anyhow, I'm getting out of the way. So with that time of first contact, there was also over in Europe, of course, as you said, there was a belief that we didn't have religion. And over in Europe, they had what they were called the doctrine of discovery, where the churches were involved, the Roman Catholics were involved, Great Britain was involved with the royalty, the king and the queen of England, and they were funding or paying for authorizing explorers to go about and go and find territories and claim the lands for their country. And one of the biggest mistakes, of course, is 1492 with Columbus ending up in the area of the Caribbean territories. You have John Cabot here in Canada, in the eastern part of our territory, around Quebec, claiming a land for the English. And of course, there's all kinds of difficulties. There's an economy based on the fur trade, and brings in French people as well. And all of that begins to happen. And that's the creation of the country. And in Treaty, I said that I am Treaty 4, and we have 7 nations here in Manitoba that are a part of Treaty number 4. But the majority of our Treaty 4 partners are in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan Indian nations throughout the south and central Saskatchewan, we have Treaty 4. and our treaty was made in Fort Capel. But the intent was good in order to move towards the treaty-making process. But First Nations were always very careful. We had prior knowledge of everything that was about to happen. And you may wonder how we knew that, but we knew that exploration, we knew that settlers, we knew that another race of people were coming into our territory. And through our ceremonies, we had ceremonies that could go into the future. And we still have them. We still use them from time to time when it's necessary. I want to say that I want to go back. I had difficulty talking about myself, but I really need to share this. As a young man, I was not born in a hospital. I was born in early July. It was warm, and my mother decided to give birth. And we didn't have access to a hospital, a vehicle. And so I was born with my grandmothers helping my mother, midwives. And they did okay, I guess. I'm here. But and my spirit name came from there. It came at that time. And 3 years, when I'm 3 years old, we occupied this home that my grandfather gave us. My grandfather gave us his home. My grandfather was blind, but he decided to give us his house. It was a two-story house, which was built, I believe, with his family. My grandfather was also a spiritual leader, and so it was important that he kind of looked after us. And my mother often said that he could do just about any kind of work that a seeing man could do. And aside from being a spiritual leader, he was a healer. And that was what made him really important in the community. When people got sick, he knew how to heal. He knew what to do. And in the springtime, my grandfather would load up his horses and load up his wife onto a wagon, and he would be heading west. And I'm not sure how far he went, but he was literally gone for the whole summer. And when he was on his way back, he was out on his healing journey, healing people, and he was well known throughout the West. And at that time, there was no money. He was paid in whatever he could use on his journey. But mainly he was paid with horses. And my grandfather would bring a herd of horses back to Rolling River. Maybe as many as 25 horses. And I was sharing this story one day to an audience, to a group of people in Dauphin. And when I was the chief of Rolling River, I was asked to come and speak. And my uncle was sitting in the audience, and at intermission, he called me over and he said, "Boy, if you're going to tell that story, you better tell it right." And what he meant was, my grandfather brought 50 horses from the West. And as he was heading home, he would sell half the herd, and he'd end up with 25 in Rolling River. And the horses were important for him, but he gave them away to his family members, to his nephews, his brothers, and he just shared what he had. And that's how it was. That's how we lived. We shared everything that we had. But aside from being a healer, it was important for him. He had a little house, maybe about from here to that ice, maybe about 50 feet. That's where his little cabin was. He built another little cabin after he gave us his primary residence. And in the wintertime, mainly in the winter, we didn't have, of course, we didn't have no YouTube or we didn't have television. But one thing my grandpa had, he was given a great big radio about that big, and it was from CNIB. I don't know how he connected to that, but maybe through the Indian agent. And the battery itself was just about as big as that too. But we would go and visit him and listen to the radio. But during the winter, we had long nights. There was no television, of course. And my mother would give me tobacco like this and said, go and give this to your grandfather and tell him to bring a pipe. And we'll have a pipe ceremony. So we sat there. At 3 years old, we learned to be quiet. We learned to listen. And we learned to observe. But he would do the pipe ceremony. And at the beginning of a pipe ceremony, our first acknowledgement is to the Creator up here. Always, always the Creator. We ask for the Creator to look down upon us and to give us strength in whatever we choose to do. And the next movement of the pipe comes down to Mother Earth. We give thanks to the Creator for Mother Earth and everything that the earth has to give us. And we take that same pipe, we move it into the 4 directions to give thanks for everything that we have, including our culture, our custom, language. It's important. The very last point of that pipe ceremony is the pipe is held out straight out like this. And the reason for that is to acknowledge for the people, and not only for ourselves, but the whole population, all the people. So that was our religion. That was our way of life. And more recently, it's also our constitution. It's not the Constitution of Canada, which is human, made by, perhaps given by legal, perhaps by the royal, the King and Queen of England. So with that, with the pipe ceremony, it's absolutely important for us. But the churches were scared of that. The churches were scared that we had a pipe ceremony. And the reason for that was they wanted to convert the Anishinaabe people to their own way of thinking. And if they could convert us, then it would be easier to take our land and our resources. But we've stood our ground, and like I say, our language is slowly coming back to life. Our ceremonies are getting stronger and stronger. We're seeing more youth at our ceremonies, and it's a good life. It's a good life to go back to where we came from, and our custom and our culture. So that was my grandfather's story, and that's the foundation of my knowledge and that's where it came from. At one point in time, my younger brother and I, we were the eyes of our grandfather. We took our grandfather out into the bush, and he would explain to us what he was looking for, and we would go and find it. It was a great time for us to be out there into the bush and to be able to guide our grandfather to the medicines that he was harvesting. And today I still remember some of the stuff that I helped to pick up, but I don't use it as much as I should. It's living in the city is pretty difficult to find good quality plants that you need. But I took you away from treaty. I am sure that you came to listen to a treaty story. So, but treaty is very important. A treaty was made between two nations. A treaty was made between the British, the Crown and Right of Britain. And I believe that you might see some of the things up here that came from the British Parliament, that came from the King and Queen. So there were one part, and we have a strong, huge history about that. You had the French and the English fighting on the Plains of Abraham, fighting for land that they didn't even own. And the British were successful in that fight. So they become the government of the country. And that's where it all begins. That's where it all begins. And the treaty making process, and then you have rights that come from the treaty. You have obligations that come from the treaty. And we have a good interpretation. And we have our language. And I believe in the introduction they said, Agwi'idiwinan. That's my language, Anishinabae. Agwi'idiwinan simply means what you already have, which means in our language, your existing right, your sovereign people. You have a land base, you have resources, you have everything that you need in order to survive. You have title to your land. That was what we had. But through this treaty making process, we agreed because of our teachings mainly. It wasn't because we were threatened. We were not conquered by settlement. We were not conquered by the Northwest Mounted Police or the Canadian Army at the time. But we agreed to share. We agreed to share the land. But there was some people that had other ideas. They seen that the wealth of the country. They seen personal wealth, that they could get rich out of this. And those were the leaders at the time. And later on, the Indian agents that were placed on Indian reserves, they too benefited from treaty quite a lot. Because some of our rights they took personally, and they made their own bank accounts grow. But and today we hear many instances where Anishinaabe people are taking the government to court. And it's because of what they had done. They broke the law. And they broke the spirit of our treaty. And we haven't, as First Nations people, we haven't disrupted our treaty in any way. Because when the treaty was made, remember I said, it takes two nations. But when they were making that treaty, there was also a pipe ceremony that took place between the Crown and the First Nation people. And the pipe ceremony represented that the Creator was present during the course of the negotiation, during the course of the talk. And that's how powerful our Creator is, that we would not break the treaty, and that we would live according to what we agreed to in the treaty. And that's why it's difficult for us right now. But the Canadian courts, the Supreme Court, has been great. They're beginning to understand what we say, what we talk about, and they're applying that knowledge into their decision-making process. Not as fast as we would like, but at a very minimum, they're moving forward. I believe one of the court cases. Are there any lawyers in here? Good. Because I'm going to say this. One of the court cases that the First Nations people won. One of the Supreme Court judges said, let's face it, when we arrived here, there was already a people that were living on this land, living in their own societies, living in organized societies, and managing the land, looking after the land. And I think that's a powerful statement to make by a Supreme Court judge. And of course, there's so many different court cases that benefit First Nation people. And there's another one, Delgamuukw. The majority of these cases came from BC. In the Delgamuukw court decision, it said the use of elders and their stories in the court of law are acceptable. And it says something to that effect. So we can use our stories, we can use our language, we can use our tradition and our custom at the Supreme Court level and bring about good decisions. But as I said, we had sovereignty. We had a right, we had title to our land. And when the treaty-making process came, there was responsibilities that were given to the British Crown, to the Crown of England. If we share the land, we want to have a new economy as First Nation people. We want to have education for our children. And a shopping list of stuff that the leadership, the elders at that time, gave to the British Crown. We want to have quality health, equity, and so forth. And the word that we use along with this responsibility and obligation, as First Nation people, we interpreted what was promised to us as over and above what we already had. We were sovereign people, but we agreed to share that sovereignty. But we also, in exchange, we also had these other rights. And Agwi'idiwinan, the interpretation of Agwi'idiwinan is like taking a blanket and covering it over you. That's what Agwi'idiwinan means. So we took that blanket, we covered ourselves with those responsibilities that the Crown would have on our people. Today we still have education for our children. Not as much as we would like to see, but at least our children are going to school. Our quality of education is not as good, so we still have a lot of work to do. We still have work to do. And the same thing for our health. We still have work to do with our health. And child and family. But those are discrepancies that have taken place are a direct result of Canadian law. Canadian law started taking our children away. Residential school, child and family. But whatever difficulties have will make us stronger. Our resolve to survive is there. We have survivors. I'm a survivor of residential school. I was in residential school for 12 years. My mom's marriage didn't last that long. As soon as her 3 children were gone, her marriage was gone. That's the power of the Canadian government. And my dad went that way, my mother went that way. Both started their own families. Now we got one big happy family. So with that, I want to say thank you for listening. You're a powerful audience. You scare me. Okay. Thank you very much. You're a wonderful audience.
Thank you very much, Dennis. We originally conceived this thing, this event. We were talking about Treaty 4. It is a treaty which we share. Dennis has explained to you his connection to Treaty 4. I was actually born in Treaty 4 territory in Saskatchewan. And so I have an obligation to Treaty 4. And I live in Treaty 1 territory. I've worked in Treaty 5 territory, Treaty 6 territory, and have a boat in Treaty 3. So I am a treaty person. And I'm a settler, an ally, but I've worked on the issue of treaty relationships for a very long time. And I've also worked on the, I guess, when I was a teenager, actually, I went to visit a northern community. I lived in Saskatoon. I went to La Ronge, Saskatchewan. And those days, all my friends were heading off to Africa to tell the Africans how to run things. And looking for culture shock. And I went to La Ronge and landed in a community where people spoke Cree. They didn't speak English. And I realized that one didn't have to go to Africa. And that before we went to Africa to tell Africans how to sort things out, there were a few things in Canada that needed improving. And I began with a project that was intended to help Indigenous language. We started the first Native language television station in Canada. My husband and I, along with the community people there. And eventually that project grew and grew. Funding, my husband actually organized the funding program, the national funding program for Northern Communications Organizations. And they came together in APTN, which is based here in Winnipeg. And honestly, every time I see that APTN truck, I cheer. It was always a project that only speakers could do. And I'm not a speaker, but I know in my heart how important the language is. And I just thoroughly enjoyed working with Dennis because of his fluency. And because we can talk about these things. But Dennis and I had a very extraordinary experience, and I have quite a limited time, so I just want to give you a bit of an idea of how it feels to be helping in this super important project. I worked at the Manitoba Museum, and one of my ideas was that the people who made treaty, the really important Indigenous leaders, are not known. You can list off all the Europeans that were involved quite easily. Alexander Morris being the most famous one. But what about Yellow Quill? There's a college named after him, a highway named after him, there's a trail named after him. And if you ask around, people have no idea about him. So I got the idea as a museum person to try to use artifacts to bring Yellow Quill back to people's memories. And we succeeded in borrowing from the Royal Ontario Museum a pipe that once belonged to Yellow Quill. And I couldn't just ask for it. So that's when I began to work with Harry and with Dennis. And they requested the pipe from the Royal Ontario Museum. And when it came, the community really responded. And they said, well, it has to come to ceremony at Swan Lake, which is where Yellow Quill had formerly lived. He's our guy. We need that pipe to come to us to ceremony first. And I said, okay, well, fine. What would you like? They said, bring it for the dawn ceremony on Sunday, just a couple of days hence, and at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, Swan Lake is 2 hours from here. So our first big adventure, Dennis and I met up at the gas station out on the way to Headingley, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I know we're about the same age. 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday is not a usual time for us. And I followed his big truck all the way to Swan Lake. And we got to Swan Lake, and Dennis didn't really know where it was. We drove around, and just what do you know, a guy with a red truck came out of a lane, and Dennis stopped him, and the guy said, oh, just follow me, that's where I'm going. So we found our way through quite a long way through a pasture. It was obviously a place which they must have used to have ceremonies be secret in the past. And when we arrived, there was, I didn't really know what to expect, but they were expecting us. And when we pulled up, I had this pipe in this rather ridiculously large case. And I hopped out of the truck, and these really big guys came up and said, oh, that's our pipe. And you're never leaving with that pipe. It's staying here with us. And anyway, I gave them a screwdriver, and they undid the box and lifted out all the pieces of foam, and finally handed the pipe to Dennis. And Dennis went off and into the arbor that was right there in front of us. Beautiful arbor. And it was, anyway, the people there looked after me beautifully while this was all going on, about 4 hours. And I watched while the pipe was sung to, it was spoken to, it was smoked, it was made one of that part of community. And then, and toward the end, Dennis and the group who were in there invited all the people who were at the Sundance, there would have been about 60 people, to come into the arbor and to greet the pipe. Dennis held it, and people came up and they put their hands on it. I don't know what they said, but it was a personal thing. That pipe was bringing back the memory of Yellow Quill in that moment, and it was just an absolutely beautiful thing. And gradually the smoke cleared, and then they fed us, and then those very large guys brought the pipe back, helped pack it all back up, put it in the back of my car, and I drove home. And it was magic, and you saved the day for sure. So when people talk about the pipe as a ceremonial device, they don't really get it. We were talking about the word for treaty, the Agwi'idiwinan. That's a comprehensive treaty and a comprehensive thing. You can say Agwi'idiwinan. That is an agreement which is made with a pipe. That is the general term for all treaties. And that pipe being a part of it means, as Dennis explained, you don't lie. And if you ever did, you've just made a promise in front of the gods. I actually worked on language for a term one time during COVID, worked with the language speakers, and we were trying to think of all the words in Ojibwe that would have been used by people who were making treaty at the time in Ojibwe. And so at a certain point, we're talking about, well, in English, you talk about a treaty, so you talk about the word obligations. What's the word for obligation in the sense of treaty promises? Crickets, silence. Finally, somebody said, well, look at it this way. You've just made a promise in front of the gods. Who's going to lie then? The obligation is in the ceremony. And that's the nature of the promise that's being made on behalf of Indigenous people in treaty making. And so you can imagine their surprise when Europeans didn't take the same approach to those promises. And that's the thing which is so brilliant about the Treaty Relations Commission and about these projects that we do together, is that it's really just a failure to understand the gravity of the promise that was made. And that we feel that if people really understood what was said and what was promised and the way that it was promised, that they would be much more respectful of the relationship and of the things that they said they would do. In that relationship, that's the other thing that's buried in those words, is that that kind of relationship which is shaped by to pipe, the people who are part of it become, the Ojibwe word is wikan, so it's like a ritual brother. And once you are part of that ritual family, then that relationship that you have formed goes on. The treaty is never the end of a deal. It is always the beginning of a relationship. And we're in that relationship now. So really that's all I wanted to say. It's just that it's been magic working with Dennis. And Treaty 4, I didn't quite think of it that way before, but it's something that we have shared. And I think I'd like to allow people to ask questions at this point. Any questions? Yes.
Was it the Scott family Sundance or the Cameron family Sundance that's won?
Scott.
Scott, yeah.
That's what we figured when you said tall people.
Yeah. And now we went back a second time. Yeah. Oh, sorry, yes, hi.
So I'm curious about the numbering system. I have a set of atlases that list the treaties across Canada, and I can't bring to mind that picture, but I'm wondering, is it only Manitoba that is, why is number 1 here?
Because Confederation was the year before. Well, it was 1867 was the Confederation. 1868, Yellow Quill caught some settlers trying to make houses near Port-au-Prairie, and he stopped them. He said, no. They put a notice on the church that said, until such time as a treaty has been made, the land belongs to us. So they promised him the treaties would start within 3 years. So 1871 was the negotiation of the first treaty with Canada. Before that, Canada didn't exist. So the numbered treaties reflect the beginning of Canada and the agreements that Canada made. But they were still being made with the Crown as the head of Canada. So that's why the treaties start number 1 in Manitoba. It's because of Confederation. There are many pre-Confederation treaties. There's the Niagara Treaty, and it does go all the way back to the Proclamation of 1763. But those pre-Confederation treaties were a little more, like some of them were quite had to do with land. Some of them were not actually even about land. They were just peace and friendship treaties, and so they're varied, and they have lots of numbers. And so once Canada was formed, treaties 1 through 11, correct? I think it's 11. And they were negotiated. So it's really easy. 1871, Treaty 1, 1872, Treaty 2, 3 was Treaty 3, 4, 5, and 6. In 1876, and then after that they slowed down a bit, but they were still signing adhesions in 1910. Yes.
I'm just wondering about the temporal part, the real life part of it. Because when you talk about the pipe, like treaties have been broken for the chiefs to their own people. A lot of fiscal malfeasance on all these treaty areas in Manitoba. They don't think of their own people like they used to. Like when my grandfather was chief in Rolling River or further back. It's just like 6 figures for the chief and the council and a few crumbs for the others. Then also too, the lack of educational development on the reserves, the mass CFS problem that we have, the mass incarceration, the mass genocide that's happening right now in the North End day after day. But it's not only the settlers that are causing it, it's us, the Anishinabae. I call them Ogima. Sometimes if I'm mad, I'll say Ogima Kanashuk or Ogima Kazawak when I'm mad because of what they're doing to their own people. So when you're talking about something sacred, life is sacred, but it's not being treated as sacred on both sides. It's not just about us and the European settlers. It's about us as a nation within our nation also. And the European government is allowing this to happen. There's no fiscal auditing of there's no accountability. Our so-called leadership is allowed to abuse our people, their own people, and get away with it. If they honored the treaties, they would look after all of us, not just a few. Not just parade their special ones out for their performative performance, but actually care about the whole of all of us. Anishinaabe. That's how I feel about that.
I think Dennis really alluded to that too, that many things have gone wrong over the last 120 years, and it's not something we can fix in a minute.
Yeah.
Yes?
My grandfather said it's going to take as much time as it took for it to happen as it will to unravel it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just at the beginning, so patience.
Mm-hmm. Patience, yes. I'm
A
not
lot of
patient.
hard work.
No, we should get on with it. Yeah.
A lot of healing.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Am I right that you're teachers, retired teachers? This group? Yeah. Pardon? Teacher's pension. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. I see. All right. Yeah, yeah. So would there be teachers among the group? Yeah. No? No. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, some teachers. Okay, there's a few there. Yeah, yeah. No, I just wondered if because one of the big things that the Treaty Commission has been trying to do is to educate teachers so that they can comfortably educate their students about treaties. And I know that it's really hard for people because they come and they hear us. They think, okay, got it now. And then they think, oh, but how do I explain that? Or I don't feel really comfortable. And so I just, I was really interested in whether, what you feel you'd need to be comfortable talking about treaties as a positive thing to your family, friends. Yeah.
Well, just a comment. I work for Manitoba First Nation Education Resource Center, and we work with 13 First Nation schools within the school system.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, we are moving forward, but sometimes we get a step back because of the resistance, and sometimes we get, we got the training already.
Mm.
Like how many schools? Probably 215 teachers were trained. But I like what you said about the relationship with the pipe. It's ongoing. It never ends. And that's the hard work that we're trying to push forward, is building those relationships and people understand it. And we have a group society which comes from different countries, and to educate people is a challenge.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you, Miigwech, and thank you, Dennis, for your hard work. It's people like you that shared stories and did work in the education system, when you read the Wabong book, or when you pick up a resource from the treaty kit that reminds us that there's tools that are accessible, but we just need to get into it more and dig deeper and have our teachers utilize it and implement it and build programs that will help our kids in the future and so on and so forth. So I just want to say a comment on that, and the result of all these different areas like health and CFS and the healing is just, like you said, it's going to take time, but it's up to that individual as well. So I just want to say that too. And yeah, so I just want to say that just that pipe is just a great reminder. So thank you again, Eva.
Thank you. Anybody else? I think then we can. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I also work at Belgian First Nations Education Resource Center, but I used to work with Louis Riel School Division up until just a year and a half ago. And many of us were trained with the kit, the treaty education kit. And what a lot of the teachers want is a quick lessons that are ready to go. They don't want to go deep into it because they're so busy. There's so much content that you have to cover. You know, in a school year from all different areas, a lot of different pressures to cover many different areas, like different people, different cultures, history books and stuff like that. For First Nation person teaching teachers, I teach teachers, what they want on reserve is they would really like it if the Chief of Council had some kind of VCR in place that said the education staff must teach treaty education. So that, because it only exists in one First Nation right now that we're aware of. There's only one community that has a VCR, and it's her community. She's teaching at Fisher River.
Oh, great.
So we wish
Yeah.
all First Nation communities had this VCR in place to say, we want the teachers to teach this. We want you to make sure there's time set aside as a first priority. But, you know, we're just slowly making progress or inching along, right? That's what we wish.
That sounds like a wonderful idea. Okay, well, and thank you very much. Oh, another question? Oh, good. Okay.
My name is Lifeline Plastic Woman of the Turtle Clan. I'm an elder, knowledge keeper. I sit at home wishing some of the community, some of these people, like I work for the schools as an advisor. I work for the University of Winnipeg as a speaker, talking to the students there, like the nurses, the doctors, whomever. But lately, us elders are sitting idle. Nobody's approaching the knowledge that we carry. We have a load of knowledge. I thank him for sharing his part, and I too have a story that I wish to pass, to help, to educate, to communicate. And this goes back to the grassroots of a family unit, as a community unit, as a First Nation unit. They need to go back to their grassroots of the people and what they're working for and what they are hoping to gain for them in the treaties. I have yet to see or hear an elder presenting herself like myself. I recently moved to an area where there's tons of schools around, and my role is going to be, I'm going to approach them, I'm going to approach the school divisions and ask them if there's anything regarding the treaties that they have in their programs, like Indigenous programs they might carry. And this is my wish, this is my hope to do. As an elder, I retired from the government of Manitoba. I worked for the government of Manitoba in Department of Education. For 25 years, that's where I retired from. And here I am, sitting idle at home, fiddling with my thumbs, wishing for somebody to come forward and, what do you know about these treaties? Well, I have them, but nobody.
Mm-hmm. Well, that seems like a terrible waste.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think we need a database of elders willing to come forward, and we need someone to spearhead that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I don't mean to
Yep.
mother.
Yeah.
It's my mother.
Yeah.
My name is Kyle. My name is Weddle. Agwi'idiwinan. And I mean, growing up in the school system, I remember a lot of history, what I was taught. I grew up a smart boy, and I knew what to do with it. I don't remember being taught my own culture as my family taught me. But that's where it comes from. It comes from your family. I recently looked for some good news in the world, and I found some in Montana that it's compulsory out there that these elders come in and they teach the classes. It's compulsory. It's not we should do this. I feel that's a good example we should look into. Have our elders be more involved with the school system. Not just from our culture, but from all cultures. Like we have Métis, we have Ukrainian people, we have everything. Elders getting involved with the students, no matter what their background, I think there's only good that can come from it. I think it's a good to look into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I guess that is it. Thank you very, very much.